I watched my mother sign the papers that stole my grandfather's entire estate from me, grinning as she left me with nothing. For years, she lived like a queen on stolen money while I scrapped for every dollar. But today, in this story of family drama, she's standing on my doorstep with empty pockets and nowhere left to go. My name is Serenity Hernandez. To understand why the sight of my mother shivering in the rain on my porch brought me a mixture of grim satisfaction and profound sorrow, you have to understand the sheer magnitude of the betrayal that severed our blood ties 10 years ago. This isn't just a story about money. It is a story about the corruption of the soul, the resilience of the human spirit, and the incredibly complicated road to forgiveness. Let me take you back to the beginning, to the days when the Hernandez legacy meant something more than just dollar signs and property deeds. I was raised primarily by my grandfather, Mateo Hernandez. My father left before I could form a memory of him, and my mother, Linda, was always physically present but emotionally absent. She was a woman consumed by a hunger for status that she hadn't earned. She viewed people as rungs on a ladder and possessions as the only valid metric of self-worth. Grandfather was different. He was a titan of industry in our state, a man who had built a shipping and logistics empire from a single rusted truck. Despite his immense wealth, he lived with a humble dignity that baffled my mother. He drove a 10-year-old sedan, wore simple flannels on the weekend, and knew the name of every single employee in his company, from the janitors to the executives. I was his shadow. From the time I was 6 years old, I spent every afternoon in his study, a room that smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and cedar. While my mother was out at brunch clubs or shopping for designer handbags on his credit card, Abuelo Mateo was teaching me the value of labor. I remember one specific afternoon when I was 12. We were walking through the expansive gardens of his estate, a beautiful property called La Hacienda. He stopped by a rose bush that was struggling to bloom. He looked at me with those sharp, dark eyes and said, "Serenity, never confuse net worth with self-worth. Money is a tool, like a hammer. You can use it to build a house for your family, or you can use it to smash everything you love. It depends on the hand that holds it." I didn't fully understand him then, but I knew he was warning me. He saw the greed in his own daughter's eyes. He saw how Linda looked at La Hacienda not as a home, but as a pile of gold waiting to be liquidated. As the years went by, the rift between my mother and grandfather grew. Linda was constantly asking for advances on her inheritance, demanding he sell off assets to fund her lavish vacations. He always refused, telling her that the money was tied up in the business or that she needed to learn to budget. This infuriated her. She would scream at him in the hallway, calling him a miser, accusing him of not loving her. I was the buffer. I was the one who made him tea after their fights. I was the one who read to him when his eyesight began to fail. He told me repeatedly, "Do not worry, mija. When I am gone, you will be the steward of this family. I am leaving the bulk of the estate to you, not because I love you more, but because I trust you to do good with it. Your mother, she needs to learn to stand on her own." He showed me the draft of the will once. It was clear. Linda was to receive a generous monthly allowance, enough to live comfortably but not extravagantly, and a small lump sum. I was to inherit the business, the properties, and the investments, placed in a trust until I turned 25, with full control over the liquid assets immediately for my education and living expenses. Then came the decline. When I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in business management, Abuelo Mateo passed away in his sleep. The grief was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I felt like the anchor of my world had vanished. At the funeral, I was a wreck, barely able to stand. Linda, on the other hand, was a performance artist of grief. She wore a custom-made black veil, sobbed loudly when people were watching, and checked her makeup in her compact mirror the second they looked away. I should have known then. I should have seen the predatory glint in her eyes as the casket was lowered. The reading of the will took place 3 days later at the family attorney's office. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, had been Abuelo's attorney for 30 years, but when we walked in, Mr. Henderson wasn't there. Instead, there was a younger man, someone I had never met, named Mr. Thorne. "Where is Mr. Henderson?" I asked, my voice raspy from days of crying. "Mr. Henderson retired abruptly last month due to health issues," Mr. Thorne said smoothly, shuffling papers. "I have taken over the Hernandez file." My mother sat next to me, her posture rigid, a strange, triumphant smile playing on her lips. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat and began to read. I, Mateo Hernandez, being of sound mind and body. The legalese washed over me until he got to the distribution of assets. I waited to hear the words Abuelo had promised me, the responsibility he had prepared me for. To my granddaughter, Serenity Hernandez, I leave the sum of $5,000 to be used as she sees fit. I blinked. 5,000? That didn't make sense. And to my beloved daughter, Linda Hernandez, Thorne continued, his voice rising, I leave the entirety of my remaining estate, including La Hacienda, all stocks, bonds, and the controlling interest in Hernandez Logistics. The room went silent. The air left my lungs. "That's not right," I whispered. "That's not what he wrote. I saw the draft. He wouldn't do that."
If you are enjoying the story, please like and subscribe. Also, please comment, as your feedback helps to improve the stories coming.
My mother turned to me, her face a mask of faux sympathy. "Oh, honey, he changed it. Towards the end, he realized that you were just too young for that kind of burden. He wanted me to take care of things. He knew I was the responsible one." "Responsible?" I stood up, knocking my chair back. "You? He told me specifically that he was worried you'd squander it. This is a lie. This is a fake." "Sit down, Serenity," Linda snapped, her mask slipping. "Do not disrespect your grandfather's final wishes. He signed this. Look." She shoved the paper across the table. I looked at the signature. It was shaky. It looked like his, but different. The loops were too wide. The pressure was uneven, but it was close enough that a stranger wouldn't question it. "I contest this," I said, shaking. "I want a handwriting analysis. I want to talk to Mr. Henderson." "Mr. Henderson has moved to Florida and is in a memory care facility," the slimy lawyer interjected. "And this will was witnessed by 2 of your mother's associates who have sworn affidavits. You have no grounds, Miss Hernandez. And frankly, with a legacy of this size, fighting it would cost you millions in legal fees, millions you do not have." I looked at Linda. She was grinning. It was the grin of a cat that had not only eaten the canary, but had also burned down the birdhouse. "You forged it," I said, my voice cold. "I don't know how, but you did." "Get out," Linda said, waving her hand dismissively. "If you're going to be ungrateful, you can leave. In fact, you can leave the house, too. It's mine now. I want you out by the end of the week." That was the beginning of the nightmare. The escalation of my mother's cruelty was swift and brutal. I was evicted from the only home I had ever known. I packed my clothes, my books, and the few photos I had of Abuelo into my beat-up car. I took the $5,000, the insult money, and I used it to put a deposit on a studio apartment in the worst part of the city and to survive while I looked for a job. For the next 5 years, I lived a life of stark contrast to the one I was raised in. I went from walking the manicured lawns of La Hacienda to stepping over broken glass and dodging rats in my hallway. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was the erasure of my grandfather's trust in me. It was the gaslighting. Linda told everyone in our social circle that I was a drug addict, that I had stolen from Abuelo, and that she had cut me off for my own good to teach me a lesson. I lost friends. People I had grown up with crossed the street to avoid me, believing her lies. Meanwhile, I watched from a distance as she dismantled everything Abuelo had built. It started with the cars. Abuelo's sensible sedan was replaced by a fleet of luxury sports cars. She bought a bright red convertible, a massive SUV she couldn't park, and a luxury sedan for her driver. Then she brought my younger half-brother, Leo, into the picture. Leo was 10 years younger than me, the product of one of Linda's short-lived flings. He had been away at boarding school, but once she got the money, she pulled him out. She spoiled him rotten. I remember seeing an Instagram post about a year after the funeral. It was Leo's 18th birthday. Linda had bought him a yacht, a literal yacht. They were drinking champagne on the deck, wearing designer sunglasses, captioning the photo, #Hernandez Legacy, #blessed. I was eating instant ramen that night, trying to figure out how to pay my electric bill. I felt a rage so hot it made my vision blur. That money was supposed to expand the logistics company, to secure pensions for the workers. Instead, it was floating in the marina, fueling the ego of a teenager who had never worked a day in his life. The specific incidents of betrayal kept coming, like punches to the gut. One winter, about 3 years in, my car broke down. It was beyond repair. I needed a vehicle to get to my job as a junior interior designer, a job I had fought tooth and nail to get. I swallowed my pride and called Linda. "Mom," I said, "I'm not asking for money. I just need a cosigner on a small loan for a used Honda. I have the income to make the payments, but my credit score took a hit when I had to pay for emergency dental surgery last year." "Serenity?" She sounded like she didn't recognize my voice. "Oh, look, I can't tie up my assets. My financial advisor says I need to be liquid right now. We're looking at buying a vacation home in Tuscany." "You're buying a villa in Italy, but you won't help your daughter get a car to go to work? You're an adult, Serenity. Figure it out. Maybe if you worked harder, you wouldn't be in this mess. Abuelo would be so disappointed in your lack of ambition." She hung up. That sentence, "Abuelo would be so disappointed," broke something inside me. It snapped the last tether of hope that she was still my mother. She wasn't my mother. She was a parasite who had consumed my mother and replaced her with a monster made of greed. I walked 5 miles to work every day that winter, in the snow, in the sleet, and with every step, I made a vow. I would build my own empire. I would become everything Abuelo thought I could be, and I would do it without a single penny of his money. I poured myself into my work. I was the first one in the office and the last to leave. I had a natural eye for design, inherited perhaps from the artistic side of the family, but tempered by the structural pragmatism Abuelo had taught me. I started taking on freelance clients on the weekends. I slept 4 hours a night. I ate beans and rice. I saved every dollar. By year 4, I had enough capital to launch my own boutique firm, Phoenix Interiors. The name was a cliché, maybe, but it meant everything to me. I was rising from the ashes of my old life. My break came when a tech billionaire bought a penthouse downtown and hated the generic luxury look. He wanted something with soul. I pitched him a design that incorporated reclaimed wood, industrial steel, and warm, living greenery. It was risky. It was bold. He loved it. That project put me on the map. Suddenly, I was the it designer in the city. Magazines wanted to interview me. Wealthy clients were waitlisting for my services. But here is where I played my cards close to my chest. I operated under a professional alias for the first 2 years, going simply by SH Designs. I didn't want Linda to know. I didn't want her to show up with her hand out, or worse, to try and sabotage me. I bought a house. It wasn't a mansion like La Hacienda, but it was a stunning, modern home on a cliff overlooking the ocean. It was all mine, paid for with money I had earned. The deed had my name, and only my name, on it. While I was ascending, the Hernandez estate was in free fall. Information travels fast in high society, and even though I wasn't part of their inner circle, my clients were. I started hearing whispers. "Did you hear about the Hernandez woman? She had to sell the logistics company. I heard she sold it for pennies on the dollar because the business was hemorrhaging money. Apparently, she fired all the competent managers and replaced them with her friends. And the son, the one with the yacht, arrested for a DUI, crashed a Ferrari into a storefront. It was a slow-motion train wreck. Linda had violated the first rule Abuelo taught me. Money is a tool, not a toy. She had treated the principal capital like income. She burned through millions on parties, bad investments, and covering up Leo's legal troubles. The turning point was the forgery revelation. I never could prove it in court, but the karmic justice arrived anyway. The lawyer, Mr. Thorne, he was arrested for embezzlement involving another client. It turned out he ran a will alteration service for greedy relatives. By the time the news broke, the statute of limitations on my grandfather's will had passed, and the money was mostly gone anyway. But the public shame was devastating for Linda. She was ostracized. The friends she had bought disappeared the moment the champagne stopped. I watched from my glass tower, feeling a cold detachment. I didn't intervene. When I heard La Hacienda was being foreclosed on, I felt a pang of sadness for the house, for the memories of Abuelo, but I didn't buy it. It was tainted. I let it go. That brings us to this morning. It has been exactly 10 years since Abuelo died. The weather is fitting, a gray, relentless downpour that turns the world into a watercolor painting of misery. I was in my kitchen, brewing a pot of expensive coffee, looking out at the turbulent ocean. My life is peaceful now. I have a successful business, a supportive circle of friends who know my story, and a bank account that would make Abuelo proud. Then the gate buzzer rang. I checked the security camera feed on my tablet. My heart stopped. Standing at the pedestrian gate, soaked to the bone, was a woman. She was thin, her face gaunt and lined with premature aging. She wore a coat that had once been expensive but was now frayed at the cuffs and stained. She held a plastic grocery bag that looked like it contained all her worldly possessions. It was Linda. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to leave the gate locked. Part of me wanted to speak through the intercom and say, "You have the wrong house." But the voice of Betrayal Hernandez echoed in my mind. "We do not kick a dog when it is down, Serenity. Even a biting dog deserves a shelter from the storm." I buzzed the gate open. I watched her walk up the long driveway. She walked with a limp I hadn't seen before. By the time she reached the front door, I was waiting. I opened the door. The wind blew rain into the foyer, but I didn't flinch. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was steady, devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. She looked up. Her mascara was running, creating black tracks down her cheeks. She looked broken. The arrogance was gone, the predator was gone. All that was left was a frightened, aging woman. "Serenity," she croaked. Her teeth were chattering. I didn't know where else to go." "Where is Leo?" I asked. "Gone," she whispered. "He took the last of the jewelry. He went to Vegas. I haven't heard from him in 6 months." "And the house?" "The bank took it. Yesterday. They changed the locks." She hugged herself, trembling violently. "I slept in the park last night. Serenity, please. I'm so cold." I looked at her. I saw the woman who had mocked me when I asked for a cosigner. I saw the woman who had forged a signature to steal my birthright. I saw the woman who had called me a drug addict to save her own reputation. Every instinct of self-preservation told me to slam the door, to tell her that this was the consequence of her own actions, that she was reaping the harvest she had sown. But then I looked at her hands. They were shaking uncontrollably. They were Abuelo's hands. "Come in," I said, stepping aside. She hesitated, as if she expected it to be a trap. Then she shuffled inside, dripping water onto my pristine limestone floors. I led her to the guest bathroom. I gave her a stack of fluffy towels and a rope. "Take a hot shower," I said. "Put these on. I'll make food." While she showered, I went to the kitchen and made a simple meal. Soup and toasted bread, the same kind of meal Abuelo used to make for us on rainy days. When she emerged, she looked slightly more human, though the robe swallowed her frail frame. She sat at the kitchen island, staring at the bowl of soup as if it were gold. She ate ravenously. I watched her, sipping my coffee. "Why?" she asked after she finished, wiping her mouth with a napkin. She didn't look me in the eye. "Why what? Why did you let me in, after everything I did?" I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the marble counter. "Because I am not you." She flinched. "I am Abuelo's granddaughter," I continued. "He taught me that money is a tool. You used it to destroy. I used it to build. But he also taught me that family is a complicated obligation. "I'm sorry," she whispered. It was the first time I had ever heard those words from her lips. "I'm so sorry, Serenity. I was possessed. I wanted everything, and now I have nothing." "You have nothing material," I corrected. "You still have a life. You have a choice." "What choice?" she asked, looking up at me with hopeless eyes. "I will help you," I said. Her eyes widened. Hope, desperate and pathetic, flared in them. "But—" I raised a hand, stopping her before she could speak. "There are conditions, strict ones." She nodded rapidly. "Anything. I'll do anything." "First," I said, counting on my fingers, "you will never see a dime of my money in cash. I will not give you an allowance. I will not fund a lifestyle." "Okay," she breathed. "Second, I own a small condo in the city, a studio. It is clean, safe, and paid for. You can live there rent-free. I will pay for the utilities and a basic grocery delivery service." She started to cry. "Thank you, Serenity, thank you. I'm not finished. Third, you will get a job. I don't care if it's bagging groceries or greeting people at Walmart. You need to work, not for the money, but for your dignity. Abuelo worked until the day he died. You've never done an honest day's work in your life. It's time you started." She nodded, tears dripping off her chin. I can do that. I'll try." "And finally," I said, my voice hardening, "you will write a letter, a public letter. You will confess to the family and to our old social circle that you lied about me, that I was never an addict, that you forged the will." She froze. "Serenity, I could go to jail." "The statute of limitations is up for the fraud," I said. "You won't go to jail, but you will lose whatever tiny shred of social standing you think you have left. You will clear my name. That is the price of admission to my life." She stared at me for a long time. She looked around the beautiful kitchen I had built, the warmth, the safety. Then she looked out the window at the cold, unforgiving rain. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." I pulled a notepad and a pen from the drawer and slid them across the counter. "Start writing." That was 3 hours ago. She is currently asleep in the guest bedroom. She wrote the letter. It wasn't perfect, but it was the truth. I'm sitting here now, watching the storm break. The sun is trying to peek through the clouds. I didn't get my inheritance back. That money is gone, burned on Ferraris and yachts that have long since been repossessed. I didn't get justice in a court of law. But as I look at the letter on the counter, I realize I got something better. I got the truth, and I got the final confirmation that I am exactly who my grandfather raised me to be. My mother stole my inheritance, and in doing so, she forced me to find my own fortune. She tried to bury me, but she didn't realize I was a seed. Today, I watered that seed with forgiveness, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. She has a long road ahead of her. She's going to learn what it's like to work for minimum wage at 55 years old. She's going to live in a studio apartment like I did, but she won't be on the street. I picked up my phone and dialed the number for the local temp agency I used to work with. "Hi, this is Serenity Hernandez," I said. "I have a new applicant for you. She has no experience, but she's willing to learn. Can you help her?" I hung up and looked at the photo of Abuelo Mateo on my mantle. He was smiling. The money is gone, but the legacy? The legacy is safe. It's right here, standing in this kitchen, stronger than it ever was before. If you believe the truth always finds a way out, like the video and please comment and subscribe if you enjoyed the story and want more revenge stories where betrayal meets consequences. Your feedback helps to improve the videos.